arguably the most common question beginner and intermediate players of AI War 2 ask is, how do I decide between all these different ship types? If that's something you're interested in learning more about, I hope you'll stick around. I'm Strategic Sage, and we're going to dive into that. I did a video covering some of this a while back called The Art of AI War 2, but most of that advice is frankly obsolete, so I think it really needs an update. I want to break this down into some basic core principles, the first of which is most choices are situational. In other words, the question is not what is best. It's not what ship is best, not what tech is best. What is the right choice or the most optimal choice for a given situation? And this really flies in the face of what a lot of players come into AI War 2 expecting from a strategy game. They're used to rigid build orders. You build X, then they build Y, they build Z, and that's the meta. And then you move on to branching out into other choices. People will ask questions like, okay, I've got this ARS. I'm going to hack a ship from there. Which one of these is best? And often I have no idea. I don't know what your tech investment is. I don't know how far you are into the game. I don't know what the other factions are, what's going on in your galaxy. It can't give you an intelligent answer. Then it comes back, look, I'm not looking for some big, deep, mystical, fully versed out strategy guide. I just want to know which one of these ships is best. And if that's the kind of question you're asking watching this, I'm not blaming you. It's not your fault. It's the way games have conditioned us to think. But you really need to turn that part of your brain off as much as you can, and for the most part, not look at different ships as being good or bad, but look at them as whether or not they're the right tool for the task at hand. Armed with the appropriate mindset, then, let's take a look at some more practical considerations, starting with synergy. And the primary low-hanging fruit that we're talking about with synergy is synergy between the weapons techs of your initial military. So, in this particular case, we've got the classic fleet, which is the default fleet. And we have V-Wings are core, concussion corvettes are artillery for their weapons tech, bombers are piercing, and the force field just goes with the force fields tech instead of one of the weapons techs, and then the heavy hull. So if we were to upgrade the force field tech, for example, that would increase our force fields plus the force field ship. Then the others, core, artillery, and piercing. Of course, you always remember that you start with pike turrets, so that's going to be disruptive. But if we look at some of the other fleets that are around in this area, well, this one has piercing, and artillery, so all of those are commonalities. And then this one here happens to be a cloak transport, which is a nice boost. Again, piercing, core, piercing, and artillery. So we definitely would want to upgrade all three of those weapons in this particular case, but exceptionally getting a bunch of piercing. And it normally will not work out this nicely. But the idea is when you mark up your initial investments for weapons, the turrets and strike craft in particular are their strongest at about Mark 4. So just getting 2 or 3 upgrades in a weapons tech can help a great deal. And if you get those more across the board, the more you have in one weapons type, then the more power you're going to get for your investment. So that's the reason to group together like that. And usually you want a few different weapons techs and concentrate that power. And if we look at the turrets here, because we'd want to get turrets as well, this is an interesting decision. We have core for the tritium sniper, but the other ones in this, if we were to hack for the vampires, they're exotic, beam cannons are splash, and the lanternfish are ambush. And those don't really fit with our other items. So if I was looking at this game and playing it, I would strongly consider getting the tritium sniper for no other reason than they fit with the other techs. So if they're at Mark, say we upgrade core twice, and these are at Mark 3, well, they're almost certainly going to be more effective than any of these other turrets at Mark 1. And it's got nothing to do with the tritium sniper turrets being better, although they are a good turret, particularly with the infinite range. The idea is that you're fitting your investments together and getting the most bang for your buck. This is an early game example from the playthrough that I'm currently doing on the channel. You can see we're at about 16 minutes. And I've only grabbed the fleet that was directly adjacent to my homeworld. We have, at Mark 3, Pulsar tanks, Velociraptors, Pulsar punks. These are all ambush. I upgraded the ambush twice because I had 3 ship lines early available in that category to give me that early boost. Now, I only had 2 available for disruptive. So that's the Stalker and also the starting Pike turrets. And then the ones that I didn't have any additional ship lines for, that's just the one. I didn't upgrade the Siege, because that's artillery. Didn't upgrade the Tesla, Splash. Didn't upgrade the Hydra, exotic. And that's typically the way that I will go about it early game. And then as you expand more into the galaxy, you see more fleets that are available. I can hack this ARS or this turret schematic server, whatever you have that you can acquire. And then you tweak those adjustments and you're gradually going to narrow in. Okay, I'm going to be investing in these categories, but those over there I'm not going to do. And a lot of this is also going to depend as you get better and better at the game, more experienced. You'll develop a play style that you prefer, and that needs to impact what you grab as well. It's going to be different for different players on a lot of levels. For example, if you like to do a lot of beachheading, building turrets on enemy planets and really attacking that way, and that's a very, very powerful strategy right now in the game, then you're going to go a little heavier on turrets and not quite as heavy on ships. You'll discover certain tech categories that you probably like better than others. You'll do things like, if you like to capture a lot of systems, go for a really high AI progress playstyle. You're going to go more into FRS and cruisers and officer fleets. If you don't do that, if you're going to go for a more lower AI progress playstyle, you're probably not going to go as wide. You're not going to choose as many different weapons tech categories. You're going to need to focus down more. And you're definitely probably not going to be going for the FRS cruisers and officers and all of that. So it really is going to vary some, but the key is to, fuse together what's available, what's out there, what are the most efficient investments I can make, and then also, what way do I enjoy playing the game? Moving forward further in the same game, let's switch from synergy now to variety. And variety is a big topic, but I would say it's next most important after synergy. And the basic idea here is compare your fleet to a toolbox. So if you want to hammer a nail, it's best to have a hammer. But you could also use the blunt end of perhaps a screwdriver if it's a larger one, or the flat side of a big wrench or whatever. That would work okay, but you definitely wouldn't want to use a thumbtack or a pair of tweezers, because you wouldn't get anywhere fast with that. And similarly, in your fleet, you want to have, the more tools are in your toolbox, the more likely you are to have something good to deal with a particular situation. Now, to start with, it's good to have some ships that are just general purpose. Let's call them generalists. They're good for most situations. So, for example, here I've got an ambush carrier that I've recently acquired. And they spawn a bunch of drones. Now, it fits with what I have currently with ambush tech. Again, that's synergy. But also, it'll give the enemy a whole bunch of new targets to shoot at and dilute its firepower. And we'll simply be throwing, different ships at it to harass it. Then with my currently existing main fleet, I happen to like the mine layer frigates. They throw out a bunch of mines that are really going to help at crowd control. The pulsar tanks, again, they're tanky. They'll absorb a lot of firepower. The Velociraptors, even though it says it's a wormhole ambush specialist, I tend to view these as being more of a generalist ship because they've got range. They can be cloaked, decent amount of firepower, and they can absorb a fair amount of damage. And they can often stay out of range of the enemy and just hit them from outside of where the enemy can shoot them at because of their speed. So those are some good ships in that category. But then you want to be able to counter specific targets. Because, for example, one of the weaknesses the Velociraptor will have, or any ship that attacks from long range, is there are enemy ships such as perhaps space planes or Mirages, or the fortified Tesla Guardians, that will take very little damage from anything that isn't close in. So you would want melee ships to deal with them, or other ships that can really close the range and hit hard from close. Now, another example that I have in this game, and I hadn't used these before this game at all, so this is not about ship memorization, is the Stalker here. And you can see it has an attack bonus based on how much energy the target uses. So it's really good typically against large ships that use lots of energy, but it's going to be weak against everything else. So this is a more specialized type of ship, helps against high energy targets, but weak in general. Now, the Sniper is not a particularly good long-range ship, but it is a ship that has infinite range, so it's really going to help with that. It doesn't have to deal with, close combat much. And I have a hack that I was about to do in here, and all of this sort of informed what I was looking at. Because if I was just going into this situation blind with nothing in particular in mind for a goal, then okay, what am I going to add here? I might want to add the force field frigates, like having those force fields to protect all of our ships. The Raptor, another type similar to Velociraptor, I can get more pulsar tanks. And then we have the polarizers. And it just so happened, and this is where the adapting your strategy to the situation comes in, that I was dealing with Spire battleships at this point. And I'd already fought one, but it was really difficult, fairly difficult. I had to build a beachhead in the system. Couldn't really handle it with just my fleet. And so that's a very high armor and high energy ship. Now the Stalker is going to help against it, but I didn't have anything that was really attacking heavy armor. And if you look at this ship, for every 35 millimeters of target armor, it adds damage, and the Spire battleship has 180 millimeters. So these polarizers will be very good against those kinds of targets. But like the Stalker, they're not going to do very well against ships that don't have high armor. So they're good in that particular scenario, but otherwise they're just going to basically be a soaking up firepower type of ship and not really help you that much on a damage side. So you don't want a ton of this, but it's nice to have some of it. And in this particular case, because of what I was facing, I went with the polarizers, and it was very effective. Now another good example, my reserve fleet here, that has Vanguard Hydras. And the Vanguards, very similar to, like, for example, acid turrets, they have the damage amplification. Meaning you can see that if their weapon hits the enemy, then it'll take extra damage for a period of time after that. That's extra damage from all sources. So having a small to moderate amount of something like damage amplification can really help with a lot of other high damage ships hitting it. But you wouldn't want all damage amplification, because then there's nothing for it to amplify. It doesn't have any other good damage ships multiplying onto that. So a lot of this is balance, really. The Warbird frigate, able to paralyze targets. That helps some, but again, if all you're doing is paralyzing and you don't have other ships pounding on them at the same time, it's not as useful. So combined arms theory, is as old as virtually as military thought. And that's what we're looking at doing here. Another option for variety that will really work good is to have, you don't want all high numbers of really small ships, because there are some weapons you're going to face that are really good against crowd control. That'll counter that pretty good. On the other hand, if you have all frigates, you're going to run into big problems with various ships that are good against that have powerful weapons against one target. But if you have a mix of large, small numbers of ships, like the frigate class, or maybe even the larger Strike-Craft type of classes, and also a mix of more swarmer types with tons of small ships, then you will be in a good position to where whatever enemy you run into is not going to counter everything that you have. The final item I want to mention is quality. And it is true that some ships and turrets are better than others, which may seem to conflict with what I said earlier, but the point is, this is not going to be the main consideration. It's last for a reason, because I think it's the least important in terms of what you're going to be trying to look at. It's better to have a lower quality right tool, if you will, for the task, than a higher quality tool for something that you don't need done. But having said that, the Velociraptor is better than a Raptor. From my list of ships I had earlier, I would much rather have a Pulsar tank than a Pulsar punk, which is not as strong. It's got some tractors, but unless you can do a bunch of micro with your ships moving in and out of wormholes and moving enemy ships around, I would always want to have the Pulsar tank. If we look at the ships that are available in this particular ARS, the metabolizing gang saw, generally not that highly regarded. Metabolization is nice, but the melee ships tend to get themselves into a fair amount of trouble. And you can use them, but overall, I'd rather have something else. If I had a choice between the Spider here, a ship that's going to slow down the enemy, and doing a V-Wing, I would always take a V-Wing. And from this selection, even disregarding tech, okay, I'd much rather have the autocannon mini pods, which is another ship that's good against high armor, or the ambush carrier frigate. All other things being equal, I would always want to take one of those two over these other two. But the point is that things are usually not equal. Now, if you have the choice, if you've got, V-Wings and Spiders offered to you, for example, by all means, take the better one, like the V-Wing. But mostly it's going to be about, do I need a ship that's going to slow down the enemy? More than that quality consideration. So I hope overall this has been a helpful video for you. Feel free to ask any questions, comments, down below, and let me know if there's any particular aspect of this that you would like to hear more about. As always, if you find yourself in a situation in your game where you just don't know what to do, it's very confusing to you, or you're just sort of stuck with, I don't know what the right move is to make here, I'm always interested in looking at saves like that, and I can take a look at it and dissect it either on a completely incognito basis. If you don't want your name used, that's fine. Go ahead and email that to me and I will try to dive into that. But otherwise, thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy the game, and good luck with your particular strategic efforts as you do so.